Hi, I'm Anne-Renee Testa, and welcome to Turning Point. I'd like you to join me in welcoming Dr. Wayne Dyer. He's written the book, Your Sacred Self, and it's good to see you, Wayne. This is a real treat.
Thank you. It's nice to be with you.
And when I said to you in the green room, if you will, how shall I introduce you? You said, doesn't matter. I'm here. It's okay.
Right.
How many people say that, huh?
I don't know. I do. I'm not attached. It's all fine.
It is.
There's so much you could say about me. You know?
I know that.
Right.
Say something about yourself, will you?
If my kids were here, they would say, "Yeah, he's a dork" or "He's a geek." You know, I mean, I don't pay attention to that.
Well, listen, you are a legend. I mean, everyone knows about you and your motivational work, and I don't think we can get enough of it. There's so much of a need, and I'm so glad that you've written. Now, how many books have you written so
14.
far? 14. Your sacred self, making the decision to be free. How do we make that decision?
Well, first of all, we make the decision to be unfree or to be prisoners. And I think most of us are really prisoners of our own perception. We are stuck in the perception of the material world, and we think that all there is that which we see around us and what our senses tell us. And like there's really two parts to this human equation. One is the material world and the ego, which is the part of us that tells us that we're separate and we're special and we're important and we're more beautiful than and we have more and we're in competition with. But it's really the false part of who we are, that which is real. Jesus said that which is real is that which never changes. And the part of us that has never changed isn't certainly the physical us.
So what part is that?
The part of us that never changes is the observer, the part that's been watching it. There's that which we notice. Okay, so we notice our bodies and we notice our job, we notice all of the things that we do in our life. And there's also a noticer within us who is noticing all of that. And I was in Boston just a few weeks ago giving a talk, and I went out running afterwards, and I ran about 12 miles, and my wife was with me, and there was a fence about, 4 feet off the ground, and I ran. After I finished running, I felt so strong, I felt so terrific. I ran over and I jumped over the fence, and my wife was about 100 yards away, and she screamed at me. She said, "You can't do that. You're 54 years old. You could break your neck." I said, "I forgot." The part of me that wants to jump over fences, you know, the part of me that has been watching this whole body do all of the things that it's going to do, has never aged. That's the part that never changes. The only part that changes is the part of us that is not real. It's inauthentic, if you will. It's just dust. You know, it's like.
But of course, we're the product of all that conditioning, Wayne. I mean, all of that stuff that we live with. You know, that stuff, if you will. How do we get rid of that? I mean, those ideas that go around in our head.
Well, you have to, if you want to know heightened awareness, if you really want to know what Maslow called self-actualization, if you want to get to the peak, the very top, where you can really be the sort of not just a dancer in your life, but the choreographer, and you can get out in front of your life, you have to do these, what we call the keys to higher awareness. And the very first of these is called erasing the past. And you really have to erase the past. Alan Watts said to me one time, he said, if you want to understand how your life works, he said, think of it as like a boat going up a river, and it's going at 40 knots up the river, and you're able to stand at the stern and look down into the water. He said, when you look down into the water at something going 40 knots, he said, what do you see? I said, well, you see the wake. He said, all right, what is the wake? And then he explained, he said, the wake is the trail that is left behind. That's all it is. It's just a trail that is left behind. And he said, the second question is, what's driving the boat? That is, what's making this thing go in this direction? And it's the present moment energy that is being generated by the engine. And the third and most important question to ask is it possible for the wake to drive the boat? And of course the answer is no. It's the trail that is left behind. Most people that you meet as a therapist and all of the work that you do have this idea that the wake is driving the boat of their life, and it's not. It's just an illusion. It is like this idea that what happened to you when you were a little girl, or your mother liked your sister better. You know, I had a woman tell me that. I said, it says on here you don't have a sister. She said she wanted one. She would have liked her better. You don't know my mother. You know, it's like, so that you go through all of this agony, all of this stuff. I was a middle child. I was black. I was white. I was a Native American. I was, whatever. I was Jewish. I was Italian. All of this stuff that is back there, and it's just an illusion. It isn't making your life go. What's making your life the way it is, and nothing else, is whatever you are doing in this present moment. And that's what you have to learn, how to get rid of all of the labels and no longer identify yourself with that which you see, but instead with the seer, with the noticer, rather than that which you notice.
So the noticer, if you will,
the witness,
is that person within us that is perhaps judging us, Or is that a very positive thing you're talking about?
No, the noticer never judges. The noticer,
I know.
yeah, the noticer is just the loving presence that is within you. The judgment comes from the ego, which tells you that things ought to be different than the way they are, you know, and tells you in your relationships, you know, the cause of virtually every problem in a relationship is just, if only you were more like me, then I wouldn't have to be having this problem with you right now. And it's like the judgment is, see, when you judge another person, you don't really get to define them with your judgment. You only define yourself as someone who needs to judge. People are what they are supposed to be. This is a divine, intelligent world that we're in. It's an intelligent system. And everybody is doing what they're supposed to be doing. That's a hard thing for us to get, because our egos keep telling us it should be the way I want it to be.
Well, then that means that you have to take responsibility. And you really, I mean, it's wonderful actually to take responsibility. It really frees you when,
Yes.
when you take that responsibility. But how then, if you're in the moment, how can you really shed that past? We were talking about Alice Miller and the Prisoners
Yes.
of Childhood. How do you shed that when you're conditioned instantly to respond?
Well, you don't get rid of your past by walking away from it. Like if this little thing here, this little blue thing were your past, and you say, okay, walk away from it. You walk away and you look back and it's still there. It follows you wherever you go. So the way that you get rid of your past is that you embrace it, you pick it up, you embrace it, and you toss it. You get rid of it. That's how you get rid of your past. You first embrace it and you look at it and you honor it, and then you talk to it. And you talk to it like you got to talk really tough to it. I can't even talk on television the way you're supposed to talk to it.
Oh, do.
But you got to, oh, it's all right? You got to grab this thing right by the throat and say, look, you little bastard, you know, I don't want to hear from you anymore. I'm not interested in any of this stuff that used to happen out there. And if you stick your tongue out again, I'm going to bite it off. You know, I just don't want to hear. But you got to literally go through this whole thing about all of this stuff that you were taught in the past about what it is that conditions your life today. It's just all an illusion, and you've got to let go of all of that. And the way that you let go of it is you just embrace it, get rid of it, and no longer refer to it.
So embracing it really, in my mind now, and I hope our viewers, is really looking at it kindly, not being angry, coming to terms with it, and then saying.
But the idea of trying to understand it and trying to tell yourself that it shouldn't have happened.
Yes.
All of that, it's like you just have to look at, see, I spent 10 years of my life in an orphanage, okay, the first 10 years of my life. And I had a father who abandoned us, just walked out on us. A father who put my mother in the hospital on 2 occasions with his beatings. He was a severe alcoholic. He spent 5 years in prison. He was a thief, he was a con man, and he walked away from my mother and 3 boys. I was the youngest of 3. I was an infant when he walked away. And he did this not only to my mother, but to 5 additional women in his life. And he died of cirrhosis of the liver at the age of 49 and was buried in a pauper's grave down in Mississippi. All right, so this is my father. Now, the irony of this man is that I grew up with an incredible amount of hatred towards this man whom I never even had met. And it used to dramatically affect me when I was a young man.
Sure.
And then I went to his grave. I ended up at his grave through a series of what I call mystical experiences. And I was able to forgive him. I was able to just like...
How did you do that, Wayne?
I stood on his grave. After he died in 1964, this was 1974.
How old are you? Oh, well.
30. I was 34 at the time. I was born in 1940, so he died in 64 when I was 24. But I didn't know it. I didn't find out until 74 that he had died, from someone who called and notified me. So I went to his grave. I was actually sent to his grave by God, by a very divine experience, which I wrote about in an earlier book called "You'll See It When You Believe It." And when I arrived at his grave, I felt that I was sent there to forgive him. Mark Twain said that forgiveness is the fragrance that the violet sheds on the heel that has crushed it. You know? And it's like, so I had to literally give fragrance out. And the interesting thing, Anne-Renee, is that this man who showed up in my life as this tyrant, as this petty tyrant, probably was more responsible for me getting on a spiritual path than anybody I've ever encountered in my life. All of the great teachers that I've had, Maslow was a teacher of mine, Albert Ellis was a teacher of mine, people who, with great reputations, and yet this man, and it's almost like you have to understand, it says it in the Kabbalah, I don't know if you're familiar with the Kabbalah, but it's like this ancient mystical Jewish kind of text that great Torah scholars study. It says in the Kabbalah that we come here for a reason. And the reason that we're here is to move from the physical plane to the spiritual plane, to learn that we are not human beings having a spiritual experience, but it's the other way around, that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And to learn that, to get that message, that's why we're here. But it says in order to go from this level to this level, you have to generate an incredible amount of energy. You have an energy body, and it takes a lot of energy. And it also says, and this is the key, it says that in order to be able to generate the energy to move from one level to the next, you must first experience a fall. Okay? So that all of our great spiritual advances in our life are almost always preceded by a fall of some kind or another. An accident, a divorce, a bankruptcy, a fire, which just destroys everything, being fired from a job. All of these things that we, at the time that they're happening, we say, oh, why me, God? How could this be happening? I don't understand that. And then you begin to, you get past it and you look back and you say, I couldn't have got here without this. I couldn't have been here without this. And so in many ways, my father was a divine spiritual being disguised as a manipulative, jerk who behaved in this way. And who knows? I mean, how are we supposed to understand God's plan?
So you made peace with your father, and
I made peace with my father, and I forgave him. And when I walked away and got rid of all of that anguish that I had been carrying around with me all of this time, which was killing me.
Yes.
I walked out of there and I wrote Erroneous Zones in like 14 days, and it became like one of the all-time biggest selling books.
What do you do when you have a loss of a father, let's say, or a parent, and you get locked into that time, and it was a loving relationship? 15 years old, your father dies. And you keep on having that empty space inside for the rest of your life, unless you come to terms with it. What do you do with that?
What you do is you start seeing death in a different perspective. One of the great teachers that I ever met in my life was an Indian teacher named Nisargadatta, and he had a student named Gangaji who sat satsang all over the United States, and I went and sat satsang, which is just a group of people coming together to experience truth. And a woman in the audience said to her, she said, I'm terrified. My son is in a very dangerous place, and I'm afraid that he's going to die. And here's this. I mean, this is a really beautiful spiritual lady, okay, who does nothing but emanate love wherever she's, like Mother Teresa, okay. And she stood up and she said to that woman, she said, I don't play the game the way you do. She said, your problem is not your son's death. Your problem is that you haven't dealt with your own. And most of us have not dealt with our own death, and we don't understand that death is not something that happens to the sacred self. The sacred self is eternal. That the noticer never ages and never dies and is never born.
So the coming to terms with loss?
Coming to terms with anything in the physical world means understanding that the whole everything in the physical world. Here's a wonderful little poem from Emily Dickinson. She's holding up a handful of dirt, and she says to her students in 1914, she says, this quiet dust was gentlemen and ladies and lads and girls, was laughter and ability and sighing and frocks and curls. This passive place, a summer's nimble mansion, where bloom and bees fulfilled their oriental circuit, then ceased like these. All of us are quiet dust. Just all the dust that you see in the world, like you go into your doctor next week and you get your little physical exam to take care of your body, and it has an iron count in it. And that iron, that is part of the finite supply of iron on this planet, where was it before you got here? And where will it be when you leave here? That isn't who you are. And once you come to grips with that,
take your iron pills. That's it. I mean,
you come to grips with the whole idea of who you really are. And who you are is not this body that you showed up in. This body is nothing more than a garage where you have parked your soul just for a very, very short period of time.
So then, Wayne, let's think on these things.
Okay.
How then do we get past that? It is a wrenching, I know you explained it, but it is a wrenching because on a daily basis, we are still conditioned. I mean, are you saying that you can just, look at it, embrace the past, and let it go?
You have to. If you want to know heightened awareness, when you reach a level called heightened awareness, you move past what we call normal human awareness, which is called survival. Most of us are just into surviving. That's what we want to do. We want to take care of our children. We want to have a nice job. But we forget why we want to survive. We've lost track of what do we want to survive for. We never ask ourselves that. What you want to do, if you really understand why you want to survive, is you want to be at peace. Your higher self says to you, You don't have to do anything. You don't have to accomplish it. You don't have to beat anybody else down. Just be peaceful, be at bliss, and serve. Know the unfolding
But I
of
have
God.
to pay the rent. But I have to survive. What does that all mean?
So, and that's the question that your ego constantly will tell you, and that's like and that prodding, always ever-present ego, which is constantly telling you why you can't be at peace, and why you can't be blissful, and why you can't know a sense of joy, and be able to do the things that Christ said. I mean, Christ said, even the least among you can do all that I have done, and even greater things. You all have that miracle-making capacity within you. But you've got to not listen to your false self. Your false self is the self that says what you just said. Yes, but. And you have all of this doubt and all of this stuff about why it can't be done. And then you listen to that, and you go right back into the turmoil, and you say, well, I really don't want to, I really don't want to know this higher part of myself. I'm talking about the difference between knowing God and knowing about God. Most people know about God. Knowing about God is what other people have told you, what you've read in books, and everything you know about came from outside of you, and therefore it has doubt attached to it. When you know God, you know it like you know how to ride a bicycle. You know, that means you've banished all of the doubt. There's just no doubt about it. When you know, and you can't know that listening to your false self. You have to know that by shutting down this dialogue inside of you and getting quiet and knowing that God's only voice is silence and going there regularly, and then you will be directed and know.
How do you get quiet?
You get quiet by making a commitment. You know, Pascal said that all of man's troubles stem from his inability to sit quietly in a room alone. You got to give yourself time to do that.
How do you do that, Wayne?
You do it by absolutely making the commitment. I see. You got to get out of the paradigms that you're in. One of the paradigms we've talked about is this whole idea about our conditioning. You know, of getting rid of all of the labels. And another paradigm that you have to get rid of that your mind is what's on the surface. And so your mind is really like a pond, all right? And on the pond is where, in a pond, if you look at a pond, all the disturbances are on the surface of the pond, all right? But that's not the pond. I mean, the storms and the dirt and the thawing and the leaves and all that are on the surface. But that's just a little smidgen of the pond. The pond is all of that that's down here. Your mind is the same way. On the surface is all the chatter. Chatter, 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 chatter. 60,000 thoughts every single day. The only problem is, same 60,000 thoughts you had yesterday, you got again today, you're going to have them again tomorrow, and your mind is constantly in this state of turmoil. If you want to know God, you will discover that God is within you, but not on the surface. You have to get below the surface, and what you do is that you just learn to meditate. You learn to get quiet. Whether you take a course in it or I've put out tapes on how to do this. There's lots and lots of them out there that people have. And you learn that just below the surface of the mind is where we call analysis, and then you go a little deeper, and eventually you begin to get to a point where you start to quiet your mind. And then this pebble that you drop to your mind comes to rest in this place called the unified field of all possibilities.
And then you can really conjure that up when you're really feeling those circular thoughts. I mean, you want to get rid of it completely, exorcise all of that circular thinking. But I think what you're saying is if you do meditate and you do think on those things and clear your head, then you really come to the truth.
You get to know God. You get to know God, not to know about God. You get to know it. And when you know it, then you discover a basic truth that most people in the West do not know, that the cause of everything in the physical world is in the non-physical world. Like if you look at an acorn, you know, and you know that if you plant an acorn, that it will become a tree, a giant oak tree, right? So you try to find treeness in an acorn. You're just like, okay, show me treeness in there, and you put it under a microscope, and you say, you can't find treeness. It's just an acorn.
Yes.
So the cause of treeness is not in the acorn. You can't find it in there. The cause of treeness is in the unseen pattern. The same is true of you, and the same is true of me. There was a little tiny drop of human protoplasm that collided with each other, and it's like everything that Wayne Dyer and Anne-Renee needed for this journey was in that little tiny drop. And it was all caused by and everything that is happening to your body and everything that's happening to mine and to everything you see around you in the physical world is caused by the unseen pattern. What we've done is we've forfeited our ability to oscillate between the material world and the world of causation. Once you go into that world by meditating, by getting quiet, you can put your attention on what you want to manifest, and you can become a miracle worker. I mean, you can manifest healing, you can manifest abundance, you can manifest relationships.
Yes, and it's what we spoke about before, that when people say to me, Anne-Renee, you've changed my life, and my attitude is really, they were ready to hear it. That's really it. They were ready to hear my words. I was the messenger. And when people are really ready to hear your words, they will really listen.
Absolutely.
It will become a part of them. What's love, Wayne?
Love is the glue, according to Pierre Teilhard of Chardin. Love is the glue that holds it all together. Love is what God really is. You know, it's like there's an ancient Indian saying that says that no tree is foolish enough to have branches that fight among each other. Okay? You can imagine having a tree with all these different branches and they're all fighting over each other. All right?
That's beautiful.
The tree couldn't survive, could it? So love is really that identification with the oneness. See, this is a universe. Una means one, verse means song. It's one song, it's all one. There's not a separate God for you and for the foxes and for me and for the cameraman and all of that. There's an intelligence that flows through everything. That's what love is.
Forever thinking about our connectedness as human beings and then thinking about relationships and marriage. You have people that are married 20 years, 30 years, etc. How do they keep the romance in their marriage, the interest in their marriages and in their relationships?
By shifting their marriages out, by getting rid of the marriage and instead shifting it to what I call a spiritual partnership. When you're in a spiritual partnership, you have a different paradigm for how you relate to each other. Like most people relate to each other like this. Their primary emphasis is on making the other person wrong and making themselves right. And they're obsessed with being right, okay, because that's their ego. The ego is talking all the time, and the ego has married the ego. You know, this false self has married another false self. And so it's like, if you want to really learn, the greatest thing you can learn about relationships, this one sentence will do it all. When you have the choice to be right or to be kind, always pick kind. Just pick, and your relationships will have romance, and they will have excitement, and they will be exquisite, and so on. Because what you will be doing is you will be seeing the unfolding of God in them and in everyone that you meet, rather than the form that God has shown up in for them. So that you give up your need to be right. I mean, you look at the things that people do in marriages. I give an example in my talk. It's like you're at a dinner party. There's three couples, and your wife says, you know, we got a great deal on a microwave oven last week. We paid $279 for it. And instantly you go, ha, I got her this time, you know. We only paid $249 for it. You know? I can't wait. I can't wait to tell her that she's $30 off, you know. That's 30 points for my ego, you know. So it's like, and then not only that, but you've got the receipt in your pocket. So, I mean, you got the proof, and you're reaching into your pocket, you know, to really show her and everybody else how wrong she is, because you're, and instead of doing that, what you want to do is you just want to say something like, you know, let your ego go. This is really hard for people watching this. Really
Here it is. Let your ego go.
Let your ego go and say, you know, it was right around there. Yeah, we got a good deal. And you don't, and you let go of that whole, it's just like you're just kind.
And how does that feel inside when you let that go?
Oh, it feels blissful, because what you have done now is removed what could be a toxic reaction
but
by
you're not
her.
Controlling anymore. And if you let go of control, which I've learned a long time ago to do, but
it's called surrendering.
Surrendering. And so when you have yourself, you can surrender, because you're not really giving up anything. You're giving your love. You're in essence.
And remember, yourself is that which is watching this whole journey. It's the compassionate, loving presence. It's the witness. It's the witness. When my teacher was told by a cancer patient that she was suffering, he said, "You do not suffer. Only the person you imagine yourself to be is suffering." See,
Tough one.
we imagine ourselves to be this because we have had no opportunity to know the sacred within ourselves. And the sacred within ourselves is eternal, and it is just watching this. So when we have patients that have chronic pain, you know, what we do is we try to teach them to no longer be attached to the pain. Don't own the pain. This isn't you. It is just, and it's like, and tell me all you can about it as you watch it. What color is it? How much mass does it have? When does it show up? Can you move it? Can, you know, where is it located? Can
what do you do when it really hurts?
Well, but see, this is what you want to, that's the ego talking. Instantly, the ego responds with, but it hurts and it is me. But as you begin to watch it, you begin to notice it, then you can see, maybe I can move this. And I've seen people, I mean, I just did a radio show in Dallas by phone, And the guy said, you walked into my studio, this brash young guy in 1978, having just written this book, Your Erroneous Zones, and and I was telling you about my severe headaches that I had, you know, migraine headaches. And you told me that you had a cure for my migraine headaches, and I couldn't believe it, and we did it on the air. And he said, I've never had one since. He wiped migraine headaches. I taught him how to move it.
So how do you move it?
You move it by not attaching yourself to it, and by telling me where it's located, and just shifting it. See if you can just move it. See if you can move it at a millimeter. Then you've already shown now that what's in charge of this thing is the invisible me. That which causes everything in the physical world comes from the divine plane, okay, the world of the unseen.
So you have this banging thing in your head, and then what do you do?
And you begin to just watch it, and you become the witness, and you just notice it, and you notice everything you can about it. You write down everything you can about it, and as you're doing it, it's no longer you. It's just like...
even if there's a physical side of it, and you've, I don't know, eaten chocolate, and it's given you this reaction.
Intelligence is not in just exclusively in this thing called your brain. It's in every aspect of you. It's in every cell of your being. And it all comes from the invisible world.
Wayne, we have 10 shows to do. What do you see as the future? What's happening for you, for the universe?
Well, I think that what we have to really work at, and that's what the last chapter in this book is about, is eliminating the world ego. So finding the divine in all of us, because the world ego is a part of us that says we have to divide our world up, and we have to divide the globe up, and we have to have customs, and we have to have all of these kinds of things.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah.
Dr. Wayne Dyer, thanks so much for joining me on
Thank you.
Turning Point. Your sacred self, we all have one. It's all right inside here, right?
Yes, that's right.
Thanks so much, and you really exhibit what our show is all about. That experience isn't what happens to you, it is what you do with what happens. Take good care of yourselves. See you next time.
Thank you. God bless.
Oh.
Thank you.